we are back with another interview, this time with Gazz, and we've come full circle, haven't we?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a bit of a journey, isn't it?
Yeah. So I started out this whole interview process by talking with Gazz first. Or Gareth. Can I just call you Gareth?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Started this
Whatever
whole
works.
process. Yeah. Started this process by talking with Gareth first, and we just kind of wanted to kick off the project by talking to one another first, and we didn't really do an interview. I did record it, and since then I've talked with 6 or 7 people, and it's been quite the journey. So now here we are. Gaz wanted to go last, which technically I guess is second to last because you still have to interview me. And yeah, we are gonna do this like rock stars.
How do rock stars do this? I don't know.
Headbanging.
No!
So, why don't you start by introducing yourself and what your screen name was back in the day?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Gareth Ward. My screen name back then was just simply Gazz, and I worked on the project. Started off as like just doing some basic level design, and then quite rapidly took on responsibility for the project. So So that's kind of, that's obviously why I'm being interviewed for this project. I'm hoping to give a bit of oversight on kind of, if there's any gaps basically on what people have said in the other interviews, and then give my own personal perspective on how it all went really. So far away with your questions, I suppose.
So, Gazz, did you tell me, you came up with that when you were playing on the Mega Drive, we call it the Sega Genesis, didn't you?
Oh, right. No, you're going back a bit further than that. So because we spoke about handles, didn't we? So my first handle was when I probably was about 8 years old, and 8 or 9, and Micro Machines on the Mega Drive came out. And when you did your save game or create your character at the time, it was limited to 6 characters. And obviously, being a small kid at the end of the day, I wanted to put my name as Gazadoo. Wouldn't fit, so I ended up putting Gazadoo. So yeah, that was a bit of a funny one. But obviously back then, because I was a kid, I couldn't spell dude either, so it ended up being Gazado, and that became one of my online handles over time. But yeah, I mean, when I got into playing like online games and things like that, when I was a teenager, when I was a bit of an edgelord, as quite a lot of us are, I ended up using the name Corpse Killer, which was stolen from a Mega CD game. But I changed it so it was a K instead of a C at the beginning of it, 'cause I thought it was really cool back then. And then when I started working on mods and all that kind of stuff, I'd grown up a bit by then. So it was another 5 or 6 years on, and I just thought, well, just say Gaz. It's simpler. It's less cheesy. I'm not trying to be cool. This is just who I am. Just call me that handle, and that's kind of what stuck, really.
Yeah.
It's one of those funny little stories where you think about where these names come from. I mean, yeah.
I enjoy a good nickname story, alias story. I like that. Gazadoo.
Yeah. I don't use it anymore. I think I've got an old email address that uses it, but other than that, I mean, I've had that email address for like 20 odd years or whatever. I never use it anymore. So simply Gaz, or like on things like Twitter and things like that, it's just Gamer Gaz, because I'm a gamer, and Gaz,
Yeah.
It just kind of works.
Yeah, you were easy to find, I will say. So you threw some questions at me in one of our recent chats, and I kind of wish that I had asked some of these, but it's my chance. I can ask them to you. So you asked, why did you join, or why did you want to join this kind of project instead of something original?
Me personally, yeah. So you've got to go back a few years into the history of like these game engines that were being released at the time, and how community-based games development took place back in the day. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was all tied into like modifying video games that had been publicly released. There wasn't really any off-the-shelf game engines like what you get today, right? So now you can go and anyone can go and download Unreal Engine or Unity and start playing with stuff, right? You go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, and that just wasn't a thing. So you had to rely on games developers to release not just the games that they were publishing, but they had to also release the software development kits and the tools to make modified versions of their games. So that's kind of my angle into all of this, was that I wanted to learn about games development and games design, and I dabbled with Radiant for Quake 2, but I was a bit too young then. I didn't quite get it. But then Half-Life came out, and that came with Worldcraft, what was the predecessor to what is today's Valve's Hammer application. So I started dabbling with that and started making levels and things, learning about how BSP works, all this kind of stuff, and so I made some Phantom games. I made some maps for Team Fortress Classic that I used in a league back in what it would have been like 98, 99, something like that, with the clan I was playing in, and just cut my teeth on that, really. And it wasn't until the Half-Life 2 leak, and then followed by the Doom 3 E3 leak, or vice versa. It's a bit hazy what order they came out in now, but when those leaks happened, it was almost like an unofficial. Obviously, it was unofficial because they were leaks, right? But included in those leaks were development tools, so I could go in and we could, it was quite a public thing. I could look at the next version of what was going to become Source Engine with what was then Hammer, and also look at the Radiant that was built in version of Radiant, or Doom 3 Edit, that was built into the executable of the E3 leak of Doom 3. So basically, I could get a grasp and see, which engine interests me. Because back then, I'd spent quite what felt like forever. And I mean, in hindsight, time is different as you get older, and we kind of spoke about this before. But you get to a point where what felt like was an immense, insane amount of time was only over a period of a couple of years, right? So I was playing around with Hammer with Half-Life 2 a lot. And Half-Life quite a lot, and I wanted to learn something new, and I saw that the Source Engine basically was the next step on from what was the original Half-Life's engine, so what's now called Source Gold. It wasn't called that back then. So basically, I just basically found that it wasn't bored as such. I wanted another challenge, basically. So then I looked into, Doom 3 has got this real-time lighting thing going on with real-time shadows, and you could edit the levels in real time with the positional lighting and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of sung to me because it's something quite different. So then I started thinking about what can I do with the Doom 3 engine. It wasn't much because it was the alpha leak, and I had to wait until 2004 when the official release came out. And when it did, it came out, and there was a lot of. I remember there being a lot of hype around it coming out because it being the next big id software game.
Oh yeah.
And then almost around the same time, Half-Life 2 came out, and it took the wind out of that game's sails. It was like Half-Life 2 was the big game that came out, and I think it was slightly after Doom 3. I'm a bit hazy on. Do you remember that at all? I can't remember.
God, in all the times I've thought about this, I really haven't looked. So let me look up Half-Life 2.
From what I remember is Doom 3 was like the big game that was coming out, and then suddenly Half-Life 2 came out. It took the wind out of Doom 3 sales.
November.
So it was kind of in the modding community. It was a case of which one is the game that's going to get the development and have people building stuff for it.
November 16th. November 16th, 2004. November.
Yeah, so it was like 3 months later.
Yep.
So that was the thing. So people started playing around with Doom 3. Half-Life 2 came out. It was a lot easier to mod, really, because it was all based on the previous engine that they used, and people just dived in and started playing around with it. And obviously you can see now the history, and everyone knows the legacy of Half-Life 2 and the modding scene. People still make stuff for it today.
Yeah.
Whereas Doom 3 didn't have that. It still had like a core group of people who are really interested in making stuff for Doom 3 as fans. But it never got as big as it was with Half-Life. Anyway, going back to the original question, the reason I got into that that's why I went down the Doom 3 route, because it's something new, something different, and it didn't just build on the foundation of what came before, particularly with the real-time lighting and the speed. You didn't have to compile in a traditional sense in Doom 3 because it read the file formats and things in real time. It just rendered the game and away you went.
Yeah.
You didn't have to worry about
I had no
compilation
idea
and
about
stuff.
that. I just figured that out. Like, I just learned that. I had no idea. That's really cool. Do you know if you could open up levels from the game, like the ones that id made?
Yeah, you just extract the pack files. There's no problem at all. So that was
Wow.
one way of learning how the engine works, right? Because you could go in and
Yeah.
just see what id software had made, and you just loaded it up in the editor. So it was all there.
You used to be able to do that in the first Doom game. You could open up their levels and see how they made them, and I learned a lot by doing that. But by the time Quake came around, they were totally compiled BSPs, and you couldn't access their map files. So that's really cool that you could do that.
Yeah, it was only years later that there was like reverse engineering BSP decompilation tools that eventually came out, but they was never as good as if you had the original source files, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then Doom 3 came out. As I said, the motivation was it was something new, and it had the real-time editing, real-time lighting, entity placement in engine, real-time, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and it sung to me because it's id Software as well. You know, I mean, the legacy of id Software. You look at the early games that they did from. Wolfenstein, even before then, some of the developers did Catacomb Abyss 3D, you know. You go as far back as that, and you've still got Catacomb Abyss 3D, Wolfenstein, Doom, and then Quake, and so on, right? So it had the legacy as well. So it's like, oh my god, there's another Doom game coming out? This is amazing. So anyway, so I got into that, and then I wanted to learn how to use the editor, and then I saw Kazahana had posted up on doomfreeworld.org, like it was a modding community website, and I saw the advert, and he posted up saying that he'd done E1M1, and I was like, actually that's a really good way to learn the engine, to make a level that's already got the blueprint's already there, obviously from the previous game, and then making something that takes it that step on to work in Doom 3 using modern technology and whatnot at the time. This is modern, obviously not anymore, but modern for the time, the technology that was there, right? So then it was a case, okay, yeah, I can get behind that. I haven't got to think about level layout so much. I haven't got to think about entity placement in terms of the monsters and so on as much. I can just crack on with learning the tools. So then that's why I initially joined the project. It was really a case of wanting to learn how to build stuff using the Doom 3 engine, because when I loaded up and started playing with the Half-Life 2 SDK, it was more of the same as what happened before. I already had a lot of those skills in place already from using Hammer, or what became, as I said, it was Worldcraft and then became Hammer. It's interesting. I haven't really thought about this stuff in years. I mean, again, like one of the things we were previously talking about, you know, I did the project, I worked on it for however many years. I've done other things in my own time, you know, where my personal career's taken me and so on. And I've never sat and reflected on how much of an impact working on that project has had on my life, you know, creatively as an individual and also in my career as a professional, you know. I mean, yeah, so it is an interesting one to be thinking about for sure.
Cool. Well, that's a very well thought out answer. I can tell you've been thinking about these questions since the last time we talked.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I kind of skipped over my second question, and I might just want to have you say this. So, where are you from?
Oh, sorry, yeah. I live just outside of Canterbury in Kent in the United Kingdom.
And that's just east of London, right? Like an hour or so?
Yeah, about an hour if you go by fast train. Yeah, roughly hour and a half if you're driving.
Cool. And where is that? Where you were when we were working on the mod?
Kind of. I mean, yeah. So I've always lived in the southeast of England my whole life. I've moved around a little bit in the area, but in terms of where I've grown and lived, you know, this has always been where I've been. Yeah, it's a funny thing, really, how life goes around. When I started, I was an undergraduate student at the time, when I first started working on the project, and I've gone into I've had a career, you know, I mean, how many years has gone past? Almost 20 years or something.
Yeah, right.
And, so I did my undergraduate degree, and now I'm working at the university where I did my undergraduate degree as a lecturer, so I've gone full circle. And as I said, like now, I'm still in the same area, but I'm doing similar kind of stuff using Unreal Engine with VR. But you think about those again. It goes back to that thing about the skills that I've got back then, and living in the area that I'm at, and yet I'm still able to still use those skills. So I'm not linking two different questions together. It's just my train of thought taking me off down that road. It is an interesting one to think about where my career's taken me, where I've lived. I've worked in London for a bit, and then moved back down into the Canterbury area. So it's it's interesting how life takes you through these little journeys,
Yeah. So I know we've talked so many times, and I really should remember this, but what do you, so you're a lecturer at the university, and what exactly are you teaching?
At the moment, I'm not teaching anything gaming related. Okay. So I'm a senior lecturer, and I'm teaching web technologies, use of CRM systems, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's exciting.
Well, yeah. I mean, the web technology stuff, always look at this. Well, actually, going back a few steps, sorry. So, I get asked this a lot by my actual students about why are you teaching this stuff when you love video games and all this? Why are you doing this? And actually, what I found over the years is because I did this project and I got a job working in the games industry. I did it for a number of years, self-employed or contracted, and I felt it. You hear these stories about people falling into this camp of, you do something that's a passion, you turn it into a job, and you will love it, right? There's this idea that people always float about, especially to teenagers or whatever. Yeah. But then also you've got the idea about, well, actually, it doesn't always work for everyone. You might take something that's a passion, and it stops it being a passion because you turn it into a job. So I fell into that camp, unfortunately, and I fell out of love with gaming for quite a while because I went and did games design as a career, and it took my passion away from playing video games. There's a gap between the games that obviously I've got my Doom stuff behind me today.
Yeah.
But it took away there's this gap around the Xbox 360 era where I kind of fell out of love with gaming, and it was around the time the PlayStation 4 came out I picked it back up again. And I think I needed that gap to get back into the mindset of playing games for fun, not to analyse, which is something you pick up as a games designer not over the years.
Oh, yeah.
You look at things as a critic rather than just enjoying it as passive experience or as an experience, right? Anyway, so you go back to why am I doing CRM or web development or any of these or content management systems and all this kind of stuff. It's because even through all of that, what I did learn is that I like systems. Okay, so you've got this idea that everything is a system. So a video game is a system. You have to think about all the different elements that are taking place within a video game to make it a game that makes it work, right? And even no matter what the system is, if it doesn't have to be a game, it could be to do with, as I said, a web-based technology. Like how does a system work for a content management system? How does it work for customer relationship and things? On the surface, it sounds quite dry, not exciting. Yeah. But what I actually enjoy and what actually gives me that even now that creative buzz is being able to unpick a system and create a new system that fulfills a purpose. Yeah. And being able to look at something and break it down to its component parts. So if you're a games designer, that's kind of what you do. You think about, well, what is the ideal vision for this game we're trying to create? What do we want it to look like? And then you'll slowly start unpicking that idea apart to say what makes it tick and how to recreate this video game as a system. Right? It's a closed system. It's a simulation of whatever in 3D with AI, guns, whatever flying all over the place. But that same logic and that same thought process also ties into when you're doing any kind of systems design, and I get that, and that scratches that itch in a way. So that's why I teach something that's so unrelated.
Yeah, I totally get that. Back when I was working on Quake levels in the late 90s, I suppose I started kind of going into Quake 2, but I was learning how to use triggers, like press this button and this platform goes up, that kind of thing. When it was all in a virtual world. And I started working with my dad and started doing industrial controls. And that to me was exactly like game design, except it was the real world. Press this button on the computer screen and a piston actually raises this thing in the real world. It was like, it was so cool, and I understood relay logic because of working on games, like an AND gate, like all these triggers, like you have to kill this enemy, and this enemy, and then the door opens. Well, that's an AND gate. It's a set of AND, AND logic, or you just kill this one of two, and then the door opens. Like, I totally got that, and yeah, I nerd out over that
somebody
stuff.
does. That's great. I mean, as I said, it's one of those things that I've talked about with my students before, and I try and explain it, but without, because a lot of the students that are teaching, they haven't had that life experience or been in the workplace or had that exposure, so they don't quite. They understand what I'm saying, but they don't quite get it because they haven't got that experience. So I'm glad that somebody does.
Yeah. On the surface, you're doing like a customer relations management. Ooh, great! But like, if you're the one building it, that's actually kind of fun.
Yeah, so and the engine, the Unreal Engine stuff and whatnot. So basically, where I'm working at the moment, we're setting up some new VR labs, and then we're going to be using Unreal Engine to create bespoke simulations. But it's for business purposes. But it'll be using game engine software. So even that knowledge now, that I've picked up. I mean, a lot of it's I know it's still like transferable skills we're talking about. I didn't think I could go down an educational type route today with this, but yeah, it's that transferable skills stuff, because I've got that understanding of how to use a model in 3D space, like in a rudimentary fashion. Back in the day, using brushes and whatnot rather than 3D models and things. But it's still being able to just understand the logic and have that way of, like you just said, really understanding the logical process of getting things to happen when they're triggered off in a certain order of things, right? That's still needed in VR, and so when you're developing a VR environment, you'd still be using the same understanding of 3D space, logic, triggers, all that kind of stuff. If you want events to happen, they have to happen from a trigger has to kick it off, whatever it may be.
And there's like a headspace that you kind of get into when you do that. Like I remember when I was doing Doom levels and then Quake levels, I got into this headspace that I only get into if I'm doing level design. And I took a 3 or 4 year break from doing any kind of level design and picked it up sometime not that long before we started doing our mod, thinking that I might want to get back into level design. And I remember going into the editor, and within an hour, I was there again. I was in that space in my brain that only gets tapped into if I'm working on a game.
Oh, definitely, for sure. I'll definitely get. Oh, yeah. I'll try. It sounds a bit weird. And I know you said you're going to put this interview out possibly for everyone to see, but it's a bit weird. But I always say in my mind, there's a little bit of my brain somewhere around here. Yeah. That gets that when I'm doing level design or anything that kind of like purely creative mode of thinking. It excites this part of my brain, and nothing else ticks that box and gets that part of my brain working. Like positive, not just positive. Like to talk about the idea of flow state when you're playing video games, especially MMOs and whatnot. And you get into this idea where if you go into a state of flow, you're in balance. You have a certain level of skill, and there's a certain level of challenge, and you get into that where you get so absorbed in the game that you're playing, you don't notice anything outside of. It's almost like the screen is all you're experiencing and nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you read books and whatnot, it's this idea of flow state, and I get that when I do level design, and it's something that I've never had in any other endeavour that I've done, whether it be for a job, whether it creatively, whatever it may be, playing or entertainment. There's something in the balance there when you're creating something using these tools in 3D space that you don't get. Well, at least I've not got from any other kind of things that I've done in my life, really. And I think that's probably what motivates me to do the things that I do in my career. The VR, using VR to bridge the gap with how universities work with business, for example.
That sounds cool.
Collaborative space and a facilitative tool. But that, again, building those environments scratches that itch,
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, how it all kind of bleeds into each other.
Without killing your spirit to play games.
Sorry, say that again?
Without killing your spirit to play games.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think that's why I can do it without and still enjoy gaming, because it's to do with the business. The context is different.
Yeah.
Because it's not to do with entertainment, it's to do with collaboration between the partners that I'm involved in,
Okay, cool. I'm gonna bring this back to some of our questions. You kind of touched on what you came into the team for. You kind of came in to help do extra levels because Kazahana could only do so much. It's only one person, but then your role morphed. So talk about that a little bit.
It's a bit hazy, really. I mean, I've always been the kind of person that if there's something that needs to be done, I'll just roll up my sleeves and do that job, whatever's needed. And I think it's a bit hazy, really. But I remember around the time, because the thing is, there was like 2 or 3 people on the team. Then I joined just after Blaster did. I can't remember their names now. I probably should know their real names, right? But,
Stephen Brown.
You know, it was when we did it online. It was all handles, wasn't it? So I remember the handles, and in my head, I've got a picture of who these people are based on their handles, right? So Blaster joined, and then I joined after that, and it was like, well, we've got these initial tasks to complete, but what we're going to do to promote the mod? What we're going to do to recruit additional people, and we need people to do music, for example, or how do we do this? And then we got into these conversations, and it became apparent that at the time, Kazahana was happy doing the level design. Right, he enjoyed doing his creative stuff that he enjoyed doing, and then these other tasks kept popping up, like, oh, can we do an interview with this website, or how do we package up the mod and do all the documentation for it? Or how do we get the tasks out to individual team members, for example? And some of that, from what I remember, he was happy to do that stuff, or some of it, but he didn't have time to do all of it because of his own life. You know, I think he was at college American college at the time. It was equivalent UK university, I believe. Yep. So he was in his studies and he wanted to devote his time more to that and then still do his level design as a creative outlet. So then I stepped up because there was these additional tasks coming about that needed to be done. I just stepped up and got them done. It wasn't a self-appointed. It wasn't like somebody came along and said, Gazz, you're going to be project manager.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, it was an organic thing.
Yeah, I think that's referred to as an accidental project leader. Accidental project manager. But I mean, you were really great at it, and I don't know if anyone else. I think it was just like lightning in a bottle. I don't think anyone else on the team could have done what you did with that. I mean, I didn't have the brain for it. I was the oldest one, but I didn't have the brain for project management. I don't now, and I didn't then.
Oh, thank you. I don't know what to say to that, really. I didn't really think about it. To be honest, I haven't thought about it, to be honest, other than as a matter of fact thing, That I haven't really processed it in any other way than there was these things that needed to be done, so I just got on and did them because nobody else was doing them at the time. Yeah. It was that simple. We built up to say we wanted to do a release. I think the first point, it was when we did 0.2, the first main release with E1M 1 through 4 included, and we was on the run up to that, and there was all these little bits and tasks. Like I said before, things like contacting news outlets to say that we had a new release coming out, or packaging something up into an installer so it could work, so people can just double click an exe and it would install it rather than having to do all the whole extract and archive, all that kind of stuff manually. So we had this list of tasks. I just picked them up and did what was needed, and after that, I think it was because I did that we did have I remember we had me and Kazahana had a conversation, and he was sat, and we did. I vaguely remember having a conversation about me officially becoming project lead and project manager. And I said at the time, I think it wasn't really officially done until 0.56 release.
Oh, okay.
Because it wasn't that I wasn't doing the job or doing the things that I was doing. I didn't want to step on his toes because he was the founder of the project. So I didn't want to turn around and go, okay, yeah, I'm project manager. You're going to do what I tell you to do, kind of thing. I didn't want to have that kind of attitude, and I never would like that kind of attitude. So I said to him, it was a case of it was as I say, it was an organic thing over time. I took on more responsibilities as things needed to be done. And the only conversation I remember us having was that I said, I say conversation, it was instant messaging and things like that, right? It was something vaguely remember something around. I'm happy to take. Is it like because I think he called me something like project lead or something like that in a conversation, and I said privately, I'm happy to be project manager, but I don't want to take away his his status within the team.
Yeah.
And then it kind of flowed from that really. But was it 0.56? Was it the number version number? So when that version, by the time that came out, I was project lead. But I always made sure on the credits that he was credited as project founder because he was the one who made the effort. If he hadn't posted that map up when he did in August to get people interested like myself in joining the project, it would never have happened.
No.
So I think there's something about always recognising, where people do these kind of things, even if it's for a short period of time, to get people motivated. I think it's a really critical thing to be doing. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. But then I just took it on, and I ended up becoming project lead. And I was leading. I mean, I was leading the project. Was project lead, and and it really kicked off after the 0.2 release. Really, was it 0.? There was a minor release to do some bug fixes, like 0.21 or something.
I think,
but then after that, it just kind of snowballed.
Yeah, I think 0.2 was the first one that I played, and that's the one that made me go to the forum where you posted about it and tell you that I wanted to join. Yeah,
so it was a good. Well, the thing is, again, this idea about time frames. I remember it being when I was in it felt like a really long period of time, going from September in joining the project through to the first release being, what was it, December, January time, and it felt like it was this massive period of time. Well, actually, in hindsight, it was a tiny piece of time.
Yeah,
a lot done.
I know. Yeah, I think I actually have the timeline wrong on when I joined, because so much of it is lost to the forums just not being there anymore. But I remember posting in the Doom 3 world post where you posted the 0.2 alpha, and I remember not that long of a time period before you invited me onto the team. And the reason I've been thinking March, I think, is because the news postings were kind of delayed. So there was a posting in March that I found in the archives that I think maybe you or Kazahana said Sonic Clang has joined, but I think it was actually probably more like January. I'm pretty sure it was not long after I said, hey, I'd like to join the team. Because I remember working on it pretty much all of 2005. I don't remember there being a 3-month gap between offering my services and you inviting me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, the way the website was managed was because it was built before... the website was built by one of Kazahana's friends, I believe, somebody he knew privately.
Yeah.
And then over time, I think it got hacked, and then we moved over to d3files.com, or whatever it was that did the hosting in the end, where it became our actual home online, right?
Yeah.
And there was a period of time where I did some updates, but I didn't do all of them. And it was in that kind of like transition period between me being just like doing odd extra tasks to becoming project lead. And when I did formally become project lead, I took more ownership and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, again, it is a bit. Hey, I really wouldn't be surprised if we joined earlier than March in that year, for sure.
I have a couple of questions that I kind of. I think I thought of them as I was talking with other people. And one of the things that I see people talking about a lot is our decision to only do episode 1. Now, I know initially there was definitely like the legal fears that, if we did the ones that weren't freely available, we might get in trouble or taken down. But in the end, it was definitely not only that. So explain, just put it out there for people, why we only did episode 1 and why this team that did episode 1 so easily didn't just go on to do the other episodes.
So, yeah. I mean, you've pretty much summed it up in a nutshell, really. When we first started on the project, we didn't really talk about it too much formally until after we did our first release. And then the thing is, I remember there was a pivot point when we did that first release. You know, it's a major, when you do any kind of project like this, you do your first release, and that's the thing that makes it become real. And we had, so it went live, and when we first did it, I was like, yeah, a few people might download it. It's a backwater mod. There's only 3 or 4 of us making a few maps. There's only 3 or 4 maps. It's not going to be a big deal, really. I mean, look at these other guys, like, who, I don't think Hex and Edge of Chaos was up then, but there are other projects that were doing some really amazing stuff, you know, releasing screenshots and things of what they were working on. So it was like, yeah, probably get a few hundred downloads, whatever. You know, it's not going to be that popular, is it, right? And then I remember going to posting it up, and then the next day looking at it, it was like 10,000 downloads in one night.
Oh,
and that blew my mind, like,
God.
absolutely. And yeah, in one night, I had 10,000 downloads off the original host that we uploaded. I just went to bed, woke up again, and it was there.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
Like, oh, actually, people have downloaded and played this, and they like it? Okay. So then we started having a conversation about, well, how far do we want to go with this? Because originally we started it as a passion project just to learn how to use the tools and learn how the engine works. I think that was pretty much a common thing amongst most of the members. I don't want to talk for everyone, they've probably said other things, but I vaguely remember people joining, and like myself, it was we want to learn how to use a Doom 3 engine. What can we do? Let's do shareware and see how we get on. And then we did the first release, and then it got massively popular. Then we had around the same time, I had conversations about how far do we want to go with this? And then the first question was, well, obviously legalities are going to come into play here, because shareware release is free to download for anyone to play through. So even though it's a grey area, because we don't have the, obviously you need to own Doom 3 to be able to play the mod, right? So I think it was a grey area, but we was okay with it because the shareware was free. And that stayed the same pretty much through the projects, from what I remember. But towards the end, like, there was questions about, well, what do we do next? Do we carry on? Do we do another project together? We're obviously really good as a team. But I think because of that initial joining of coming together was to get the shareware levels done, to learn how to do the engine. And we got it done in quite a short period of time, right? And by the end of it, all of our motivations had changed. And trying to keep a team together for that, especially if they're all volunteering as well over that period of time, was quite a hefty challenge to face. So where it began as being let's learn how to use the engine, see what we can do. Then the legalities hit us, and we was kind of like, oh, wait a minute, we might get shut down if we do more than shareware. We don't want that. We want to be able to at least finish a deliverable product, right? Let's do or mod. Sorry, I'm talking my lecturing language, sorry. That's getting a game out or getting a mod out. And then it was and then toward the end of it was like, do we do this other ninja project? Do we do we carry on doing more of do we risk getting taken down and do more levels and whatnot? And then by then it's actually, there was a few people phasing out on the threads on the developer forum, people not posting as much, and you know, I've got my levels done, I'm happy, kind of that kind of attitude. I've got my I've done the maps are done, the weapons are done, and the conversation changed. Yeah, I think it was a natural end, really. Yeah. So yeah, I've always dabbled with the idea of doing some kind of extra release, even if it's just to tidy things up a bit on the 1.31, and then also making it work with, or doing a proper, because there's source ports now for BFG, and some of them have partial support for Classic Doom 3. You know, people have built it in the mod capabilities into the source ports directly, so it will just work, right? So there's, can we refine that and make that a bit better, a bit more of a better experience as well? But in terms of finishing it off, I think it's like, we've had these conversations recently. I think it is of its time. We had the team together at the right point in their lives to be able to produce something that was achievable in a short span of time when Doom 3 was popular. You know, and it did what we needed it to do for us all from where we were at in our lives, I suppose. You know, whether we were being young people, you know, not having sense of a lot as a career yet, really. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think some of the sort of like behind the scenes discussions about why we only did episode 1. I think there was a lot of discussion about as artists, it's difficult to just continue to remake someone else's stuff. and as enjoyable as it was for myself to remake all the songs from the first episode, I had very little drive to want to do more. Like, I figured I redid, and the thing is, a lot of the songs from episode 1 were repeated in episode 2, so it wouldn't have even been all that many. But I personally had no drive to want to do more remakes.
I mean, for me, I was at a time. Yeah, I think when the mod finished, I'd graduated from university and I was looking for industry jobs. So I was using this as a show. I was used it as a showpiece to say I can do this. Give me a job. It works, obviously, which is great. But yeah, you know, it was a showpiece. So by that point, it was like, I'm going to move on to do professional development now. I don't need to do the mods anymore. And that was the kind of attitude I had then as well. It's a bit of a mix of things, really. I'd learned what I wanted to learn. I mean, personally speaking, I'd learned what I wanted to do from the project. I'd learned how to use what was then a modern game engine to create levels. You know, so I got from it what I wanted, what I got from the project, what I wanted to get from it, I suppose.
And we did put it out there, like when we released 1.0, we said to the world, anyone can freely take this and run with it and complete the rest of the episodes. No one did. So that tells you, you know, what a task it was and how rare it is to have a team together to do something like this with a shared vision.
Well, it's the time frame that the amount of time that we used to do it in as well. I mean, yeah, because it was all new. It was a new engine, new idea, like new ways of working, new ways of creating assets. Now, I mean, I'm talking from a level design perspective because that was my background, but also creating audio that was high fidelity. The animations and modelling, all that kind of stuff that got pulled into it as well. The menu system, you know, Snoop Jedi when he did the menu system, you know, that's amazing. Like, how many other mods came out that used that engine that had a custom menu in front of it? That we had again, we had that conversation before about it. It was like all these little bits around it made it so much more than just being a pack of levels, a map pack, right?
Yeah.
It could have easily just been a 9-map pack for Doom 3.
Right. Absolutely.
And that would have been it. But all these extra, like the music, the menu, the item models, you know, it made it something more. I hate this. I know it's a bit of a cheesy thing to say, but all those little component parts made it much more than its component parts. Right? It was so much bigger than it. How it all came together, and made it into a proper mod and not just a bunch of maps that some people made. You know, I think that's one of the big appeals for that project as well.
So, speaking of the menu, when I was talking with Snoop Jedi, do you remember his initial crack at the menu? Do you remember what it looked like?
I think so. I had forgotten about it until it came up in some of our conversations. And when you put the original Doom 3 ISO, or CD or whatever into it's ISO now. I haven't got a CD drive anymore, right? When you put the original disc in, it has an auto load, like almost like a flash macro media menu that comes up with a little dot, like a semicircle thing with pentagrams on it for the art. And I vaguely remember he did a mock-up that was of that style for the menu. Like, I don't think he implemented it at all, but he just did a mock-up. And I think he might have done one for. I think it might have been my brains playing tricks on me. I vaguely think he did one that was similar to the PDA layout as well. Or was that the wallpaper? That was a free wallpaper. Sorry, that was in.
Okay.
You know, when we did the releases, we had fans creating content, and we had it in the installer. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So it was. I think he did it as it was like that menu that pops up when you put the CD in for the first time when you put for Doom 3 when you install it. But I don't think he built it. I think I remember seeing a couple of screenshots before he moved on to what he produced. Yeah, well, I mean, that's really good stuff. I mean, it's, as I said, like those things, like it takes a lot of time to put. You'd think putting a menu together is going to be simple. It's not.
No.
You've got to think about all the different component parts, the bits and pieces that make it come together. How do you make it so you can select the right items? How do you write out and save this data to a config file? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
there's so many different component parts that go into creating just the menu system alone. But yeah, I think that definitely makes it a mod project rather than just being a load of maps for sure.
Yeah. Hey, I've got another question for you because we were kind of we watched that. Who was that guy? The guy that just played through the mod recently. FP.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, FP I think is his name. YouTube name.
Yeah.
He kept saying, "Why did they remove the flashlight? This would be a perfect room for the flashlight." Why did we remove the flashlight?
It wasn't in the original Doom.
Okay.
Simple as that, really.
Yeah.
The thing is, I know it's a massive contentious point with Doom 3, but because I played it when it first came out all those years ago, I was quite happy with a torchlight running through some of those creepy corridors in pitch black. Showed off the lighting effects really well with the real-time lighting with your torch.
Yeah.
Having a pistol, so it made you feel a bit more on edge when the imps are coming at you without your one-shot shotgun, So yeah, it was a considered idea. Like, we didn't include it for because it was in the original thing. But yeah, I mean, there's this thing about lighting as well. Like, if you go through levels now, a lot of the maps is something we've spoken about a bit. Again, was back then everything was obviously CRT monitors, right? So the amount of brightness that a classic CRT monitor puts out was so much brighter than the contemporary LCDs displays of the day. So if you tried to make levels and things and do lighting in effect, you had to think about not just CRT but also the LCD having a lower light output. Didn't think about it back then because CRT was the dominant screen display technology still. So when we made the maps, they were all made with CRTs, which are a lot brighter. And we get it now because you can get HDR and whatnot on modern monitors, right? With the nits or whatever are far higher than a standard LCD display. Back then on the CRT, though, there was none of that. Basically, the CRT was ultra bright and it had perfect blacks and brilliant white. So when you went into something like Doom, you'd see those dark corners, where there's the minimal lighting because of the monitor that you're using. Whereas now you use those same levels that were built on CRT on LCD, and they're a lot darker. So the corners you go into are so much more darker that you can't see in some of those corners. They're not lit enough.
So it's pretty safe to say then that when you were creating levels with your brighter CRT, they looked brighter to you, and then someone else would play them, and they looked a little dark.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we had that when we was doing development as well, right? So E1M9, I remember the first time I did E1M9, just a bit where you've got the Hell Knights or whatever they're called. I forget their proper name now. But the monsters come up out of I've made, instead of being just in two sarcophagi where they just open up in Regional Doom, the two doors just open and they're just there. I made it. They come out like a platform out of like a frozen chamber or whatever.
That's E1M8, right? E1M8.
Yeah, sorry, yes, E1M8, I said mine, didn't I? Yeah, E1M8. So they come up out of these kind of like frozen chambers, and then the glass opens and they come out running at you or whatever. So that first version I did, that area was like so dark, like really, the lighting was really low because I wanted to make it all dark and moody,
Yeah.
And then I put it up for people to look at with a few screenshots and whatnot. And the initial feedback was like, "It's so dark, I can't see anything." I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" And then I did another version where I upped the lighting, like I put an extra few light sources, made it like an extra 20% brighter. And I was like, "It's too dark. It's too dark. It's too dark." And in the end, I just whacked all the light levels up and everything. And then they was like, "Yeah, this is how it should be. I can actually see what I'm doing now." Whereas to me, because of the CRT monitor I had, it was like a really top-end Trinitron. I wish I still had that screen. Anyway, it was a proper nice Trinitron flat CRT monitor. It was super bright. So to me, it looked fine. But to everyone else, like the feedback was continuously, "It's too dark. Can't see anything."
That's funny. Nowadays, the equivalent of that is you're developing on a computer screen that's a widescreen, and you are doing a responsive site that needs to work on a phone. That's the equivalent of that situation. Worked fine for you. Doesn't work fine for someone else.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I mean, you think with BFG, Doom 3 BFG, when they released that, because when people, if you go back and look at the reviews, they're saying, "Oh, the lighting's a lot brighter on the BFG release." So id Software, when they released the BFG release of Doom 3, they upped the default lighting level across the whole game. So people say, "Oh, it's lit differently." It's a config tweak. It's not even, they didn't go around and relight the whole game and put additional light sources in and whatnot. They just upped the base light level for the whole game. I'd imagine that's probably one of the reasons why when they built Doom 3 originally it would have been CRT, and then when they did the BFG release, by then everything was LCD displays.
Yeah.
So you even see that legacy now. You know, if you go and look at the BFG release on Steam, it's got the same issue.
Well, the other thing with the BFG release is they let you use the flashlight at the same time as a gun.
Oh well, yeah,
yeah. That was helpful. Okay, so I'm looking at some of the other questions and wondering if you might want to talk about anything in particular, because I've got. Like, do you have any stories to tell? How it affected you personally? I think you've already touched on a lot of that. What projects did you work on when it ended? Did you ever get a job in the gaming industry? What do you think of the legacy is? What's your favorite part of working on the mod? Did you think it would be as popular as it turned out to be? So stuff like that. And I have some other ones like... how long did it take? But we kind of already talked about that. Totally already talked about that. Did you ever think about going back and doing some work on the mod? Are you still in contact with each of the other team members after all these years? So, out of those questions, like, is there anything in particular you'd like to tackle? Because when this interview is done, it's going to be scheduling another one and doing all that again.
Yeah, it's that looking back, I think again it came up in some of the chat messages we've had recently, the conversations, but it's the thing about looking back, you forget how small the modding community actually was, right? So you go back and look at what was on doom3world.org and the projects that were coming out of that site. So there was Classic Doom 3, Hex and Edge of Chaos, the Doom 3 Can Do It 2 projects,
Last Man Standing,
Zombie Slayer, you know, these mods, and you look across the people who worked on these mods that actually made it, you know, and actually were proper mods, not just a few odd maps or a duct tape mod for a flashlight, you know.
Yeah.
And you look back and think, who are the people who worked on these? And I'd forgotten, and looking back through the history and digging out some of the old stuff on archive.org and things like that, and realising and remembering thinking, a lot of the names they keep repeating. You know?
Oh yeah.
Like I did some time working, volunteered some time on Hex and Edge of Chaos, and then you hear you hear about other members who did Classic Doom 3 working on other projects across what came out and the ones that are still available today and popular. And you don't really see that. Like, you don't really see that in other communities for sure, in other games. Like, yeah, you probably get people releasing the odd like, you get people who are professional semi-professional level designers, and they release maps, and they've got a portfolio of maps levels that they've released for particular games over the years and whatnot. But in terms of actual mod projects coming out of these small communities, and then the fact that there's all these people who have like helped other projects to make them become what they became, like a mixing pot of skills, you know. And it's not like it's like a Venn diagram, right? You've got some people worked on this project, some people worked on this project, and there's an overlap in the middle, right? Yeah. But you don't see that, you know, you don't see that. That's not something I've seen, at least anecdotally, I've not seen that in like back in the Half-Life 2 community at least, or other modding communities back then. It didn't really happen that way, and I think Doom 3 was quite unique in that. You know, it was the same people working on different projects, working together. But so you talk about what do people move on to after? I think probably not just looking at Classic Doom 3 as a project, but those same people moved on, did work on other Doom 3 things over like at least a couple of years after to wrap up what they were doing themselves. You know, look at Brian Henderson, for example. You know, he did Zombie Slayer to just learn a bit more about how to do animation and quick time events and things like that. Or so you know, that cross-pollination thing, I think it was quite unique for that time. I don't think you'll see that again so much now. Because
who was it? I was talking with someone about, oh God, I don't remember who that was. I've talked with so many people, but they were talking about how with Doom 2016, it basically, at least for this era, it just spelled the end of packing in a level editor with the game. You know, this is id Software. Most of their employees came from the community, and they had their level editor that just let you like snap bits and pieces, pre-built pieces of levels together and make your own levels, but nothing like what we had. Like, you lay down each and every single brush and every mesh, everything. Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah,
it's sad that kind of.
It is a lost thing. I mean, but it's the accessibility of the tools now, and being able to get assets from asset libraries and things online. It's just a completely different world, you know. Back then, we didn't have asset libraries, so if you wanted to do anything, you had to use the game that came with. You know, you buy a game, it'll come with the tools and the assets, and you create new stuff with it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, you could just go to an asset library and just purchase a load of models and chuck them in to, I don't know, Unity 3D or whatever, and you've got yourself a really basic environment to run around in first person. You know, it's a different time now. You know, you don't really get that kind of level of mods. I mean, look, there are games that do get mods, but a lot of them don't have anything like a whole new set of levels, or like I said, you know, like mods. You know,
yeah.
Skyrim's the last one I can really think of that had that.
Which one?
And even that was big, but you know, it wasn't really a whole kind of continent. It was new quests on the same map. You know. There probably are others out there. It's just they're not as. I suppose it's because I'm not part of those communities anymore, especially because of the volume of games that come out these days.
Oh yeah.
You know, you think then basically Half-Life 2 and Doom 3, everyone who was into game and played them. Whereas now there's so many games out there that anybody could just pick up and find. That's the benefit of it, right? Anyone can find a game to play that they want to play, and it's amazing because everyone can. It's catered for. But then the thing about custom made things specific for a community, it's so vast, it's almost impenetrable because there's so much going on out there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what are the two free engines now? There's like Unreal, and was it the other one, Unity?
Unity 3D, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the Unity one our teenager wanted to try, and it was just like daunting. Like, you open it up and you look at some tutorials and they describe how to make tiles and stuff, but after a while I just said, nah, let's just go download a pack of stuff and use someone else's stuff. And then our teenager actually made some levels, like 2D side scroller levels that were actually kind of fun, but they lost the desire to do that kind of thing. But I was a little sad they didn't keep that up. But
well, I think it's pros and cons, you know. I think the tools are there and they're easily accessible, and you can get resources. There's guides online, like you just said, YouTube tutorials and all sorts of stuff if the desire is there to learn, it's there. But because there's so much you can do with these tools, like finding and navigating a way through to be able to actually build something meaningful is a lot more challenging. Like the basis isn't like how do you get from not knowing anything to be able to build something meaningful, and also be something that, like, you've got to think back then, if you did any kind of mod, it would be using those game engine with those assets. You'd instantly create something that looks semi-professional.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if you download something like Unreal Engine 4 and you start dabbling and use off-the-shelf models and things, now you haven't got much of a budget or you haven't got any money and you have to use the open source free stuff, then it's going to look pretty janky, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's the other thing. Like, back in the day, you could create stuff and it would look semi-professional, whereas now it's a lot more harder to get the tools are there. It's easier to learn how to do these things because the resources are there. But to be able to build something that's more accessible and professional, the barrier to entry is far, far higher.
Yeah,
far higher.
Definitely. God, what else? What else could we talk about here? What other questions? Well, I know we're both going to walk away from this thinking, "Oh man, we've totally forgot about this." Do you want to try answering the question? What do you think the legacy is of cdoom?
Isn't it? Well, I think there's two aspects to that. There's the personal stuff. You know, I've said a bit about career and what I'm doing now with my life and things like that since. But from doing that project, I learned about how do you manage a 12-person team to create something and keep them motivated? How's that different managing volunteers to managing paid employees? Massively different, right? How do you keep people motivated and all the rest of it, you know? So there's all those kind of like skills that I'd learned that I've carried on using to this day. Learning how, like, you know, I wasn't very going back even further. When I was at school, I wasn't very good at English. Okay, you know, and I see, like in the UK back then it was GCSEs, and I've got D's at GCSE. I had to do resits to get C's, which would have been like, you know, part of equivalent of, well, that's passable. Okay, you can go and do A levels or degree and whatnot, or move on if you've got C's and above. And I've got D's at English, and I had to do resits. But then when I worked on this project, I wrote interview responses, emails, job adverts. I made articles on our website, you know, and that taught me about web literacy, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So then being able to like write articles effectively and improve my use of language, you know, written word. It wasn't because of anything other than working on this project. I mean, I did a degree in the end. I was doing it at the same time, but it was making those and writing those articles and things that forced me to develop my ability to use written language, not just casual in chat and whatnot, and actually put it into written articles and things for people to read, for the public. And those basic skills, again, they've carried through my career, you know. And I think that there's, from a personal aspect, there's my own personal skills, the project management, the ability to break down things into component parts, the systems thinking stuff I've realised over the years is actually something that probably came from that originally. In terms of legacy as a mod, I just think it's amazing that people, like we just saw last week, FP was it? On YouTube, did a playthrough, and you're like, right, this is somebody. There's people that weren't even born, or just about were born, or in you know, in nappies or diapers, whatever side of the pond you're on, right? Are playing it now, and now still after all these years, and it still gets regular downloads. And every now and again, we've spoken about the idea about getting not necessarily fan mail. I get emails coming through. Usually, it's can't get the mod to work. You know, that kind of thing. How do you get it to load up? Well, read the guide, literally patch it, and install the game. It's not hard, right? But yeah, still getting people emailing me to this day about the project is one thing. Seeing people put YouTube videos up and respond, you know. I think because I hadn't looked at YouTube for a long time, particularly searching for Classic Doom 3, and then this one came up because we've been talking about doing these interviews. I looked on, I just happened to search, and it came up with that very timely video that went up. And then you saw the comments, and I was like, I was in there in the comments typing away, replying. I saw you was on there as well. It was like, it's just really cool, man. Like, it was really cool to see like all these different comments and things, and being able to just I don't know, not just reminisce, but be like, it's still relevant. There's still something there. People still see it as being relevant, you know. People are still playing this thing that we created all these years ago. And even if it is a fan remake, it still gets some, like, you get the top 10 lists of mods to play and things, and it still comes up, you know, particularly for Doom 3, of course. But I think like, playing back through it again, I get, like, back then, because it's almost like, because you see something every day, you know, you do these things, you release it, you don't think it's that great because you've seen it every day. And then over the years, like, you see the YouTube videos, and there's always that compression artifacts coming through, especially for the older videos from like 10 years ago and whatever. So you look at them, and it always looks a bit not great. Loaded it up a couple of weeks ago after we first started talking again, and playing it on my modern PC with a decent monitor, headphones on, and it actually looks really. I know this is kind of like self-serving or whatnot, but it looks really good.
It does.
Like, it looks so much better than I remember it looking.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you know, it's so crisp. I'm running it at, I don't know, 1440p on a 27-inch monitor, whereas back then it would have been 1200 by whatever on a 19-inch CRT monitor. So obviously it's bigger and better anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just again, as soon as when you load up, you go in, you start on E1M1, the music kicks in, you're on, you know, you're in there, And it's not just like the tinny MIDI music, it's proper metal as well, and you're just in the zone. And I played through the first 5 levels. I didn't want to stop because I had things I had to be getting on with. And I went on and carried on and finished playing through the thing. It's a nice short experience. It takes about an hour to get end to end and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
I actually didn't.
Nice
I started playing it, but I didn't finish it yet. But yeah, man, I had such a similar experience because the funny common story between most of us is that our computers that we were developing the mod on were all a little bit underpowered. Like when I loaded the mod, I may have been lucky to get like 15 frames per second, and that's the way it was for Doom 3 itself. So I had a really difficult time playing that. Man, I loaded it up, cranked all the quality settings, and I was like, oh my god. And I don't have a very like high-end computer right now, but it's more modern, and yeah, it just blew me away.
Yeah, it's
I
cool
will
to
say,
see.
Speaking of the kids these days who weren't even born when we released it, my 17-year-old was looking over my shoulder and said, "Is that your mod? Is that the thing that we're gonna do the documentary on?" And I said, "Yeah." And my God, they were like, "Oh, that's really good! I can't believe that."
It definitely holds up. It definitely, yeah. I mean obviously a lot of it's the assets that came with the original Doom 3 game, right? So they were retail. It goes back to the thing I was saying about not having the standard of assets. If you're trying to build stuff on a modern engine these days, you have to build it yourself, and if you can't build it yourself, you've got to have money to pay someone to make the assets, right? So going back to what was in Doom 3 and having back then retail quality assets and all the rest of it meant we could put something together that was actually of a decent quality and seems to have, well, yeah, I mean, intro and ending, obviously, but it stands the test of time for the actual game. Yeah. Like, some of the comments, right, this is an interesting one, right? So, intro and ending. So, when that was put together, originally, because I was still kind of a little bit edgelordy back then, I'd been 22 years old, you know, still opinionated in my heavy metal and all the rest of it. Metal's the only good music in the world, don't listen to anything else kind of attitude, right? I've grown up since then. But then I wanted the intro and ending to be like super serious, like mean and like dark and serious and moody, you know, horror, you know, that kind of thing. And then when I saw the intro and ending when it came out after it had been created, I was like, it made me cringe. And it took me a little while before I kind of accepted what had been created. Because I was like, well, these are volunteered guys. I'm not going to just reject what people have created. It's not my role to do that. I'm just stewarding the project. So these video, the intro and ending was first created, and I looked at it and I was just like, oh my god. And then I let it sink in, and I went back to it again. And I went back to it again. It took a couple of weeks. A bit like listening to a new album for the first time, right? Yeah. Got to the end of it, and I was like, and actually, I took it for I didn't see the comedy in it to begin with, and how to take it because of my mindset was so set in stone back then about my views of being really serious and whatnot. Yeah. And it took me a couple of weeks for it to sink in and go like, yeah, actually, this is really funny and this is really cool. We're going to do this. And I actually skipped forward and going through these YouTube videos again over the last couple of weeks, seeing the comments and things, and people going like, "Oh, this is so funny, this is amazing," you know, all that kind of stuff. Because it's like slapstick or whatnot. I don't know. I can't remember some of the comments right now, but I remember, and I was like, "Yeah, that was really that you know, keep having it in there was like really good to see, like having it in there."
One of the guys,
it's of its time as well, and what you could do with the engine. It's so hard to animate stuff.
Oh yeah. So my interview with one of the fans who went by Angry Kid Joe back in the forum,
I remember him. Yeah.
He loves the intro and outro cinematics. Absolutely gushed about them, and that was so great to hear because like you and I think we're sort of we were on the same page when we were making it. Like I had voice actors coming over, and I was trying to like direct them. They weren't voice actors; they were just friends and family and one guy I knew at work, and we were definitely going for that serious tone, and like when I say get the next volunteer or whatever, it was surprising when I first watched it how it didn't really match what I saw in my head, like I was trying to make fine art, you know, film noir kind of thing. But Yeah, so Joe, he said it was like the perfect intro because like in the original Doom, you just started up and you ran, and there's something to be said about how great that was and everything, but he said unless you read the book, you didn't know what the backstory was. And he said there was this like, oh, I can't remember exactly how he put it, perfect blend of camp and horror that like gave you the backstory, and it kind of built up, and he said it was like a crescendo. By the time the door opened up on E1M1 and the music started, it was like, yeah, now you were pumped and ready to go. So that was really cool to hear. I think Brian's really going to enjoy, Brian Henderson is going to enjoy what Joe said about that.
Cool, that'd be good. There's a, on the ending sequence, there's a bit where he's walking across the bridge on the ending sequence, and he says something like, because it's just reading the text from the original game, ending.
Yeah, that was just me reading it, yeah.
It says something like, what was it? He's escaped the hell, and he's washed up on the shores of hell. But the way it says it sounds like, oh wow. And it's that tone of voice in there. It's like, oh wow, he's landed up on the shores of hell. It's just like,
I probably could have done a slightly better job reading that.
It's just that one bit. I'm not criticising the whole thing. It's just that one little bit. It sounds like it's like a sigh.
And the only way out is
well,
through.
Here I go again. I mean, that always, whenever I saw
now that
you've
beat the big badass, okay.
Yeah, it kind of that little bit always make me crack up when I hear that. Oh, it's so good to have those in there, though, for sure. I mean, it's the as I said, looking at the YouTube comments and things like that, it was like, yes, they love the mod, they like playing through it, and they look it's bookended as well. It's really cool.
Yeah. Joe also liked the way the ending cinematic ended with saying the only way out is through. He said that was like the perfect way to end that. So he also really loved. He said the way the chainsaw is introduced was like the best fan service, and he was gushing about that. So
it's the animation where it kind of like spins and then the thing opens up, and
and then there's like the zombie scientists in that room for you to grind up
down,
with.
And then you've got
and those were that was the only time those enemies showed up in the whole mod, and it was just fan service.
Yeah. Who is it did that map? I can't remember now. Was it?
That was Kazahana.
Yeah. It's the whole animation thing. I remember because I played it a couple of weeks ago. It's fresh in my mind again now.
Yeah.
There was some stuff about how the project was managed at the time and how we used to communicate with each other, and we said a bit about the fact that we used IRC for some of our chat, but nearly all of it was on forums.
Yeah. So
it was asynchronous, like, you know, it was the whole thing around how we work now. You think, especially the pandemic and all the rest of it, and if you're in any kind of tech job, you'll be so used to Microsoft Teams meetings, you'll be sick of them. And back then we didn't have Microsoft Teams. We had some messaging with MSN Messenger or ICQ or whatever it was, but really it was all through asynchronous messaging on our forum. And remembering how it all pulled together. You know, I mean, I didn't have tools like you said before. You know, Jira, we didn't have that. We didn't have Microsoft Project. If you wanted a Gantt chart, you had to do it in, like, I don't know, a rudimentary early version of Excel spreadsheet.
I would have run away if you started using Microsoft Project.
Oh no! Well, yeah. So it was all I did. I remember posting up we'd work out what tasks needed to be completed for the next release. Post them up with the name of the task, who is responsible, and then a percentage. As I said, if it was 0%, and as people post up. As people gave updates, like they put screenshots up and they'd say, yeah, I've done this, that and the other. I'd be like, oh, that looks like it's about 20%. Oh, they've said this. Oh, that looks like it's about 40%, you know? Because we had the main post that was sticked with that kind of progress report on it. And then underneath there was the sticked individual ones for the maps and the assets and all the rest of it. So then we all had our threads talking about what we've been working on and posted up screenshots and shared versions of the maps or whatever has been worked on. and it was that. So I based the percentage of the tasks being completed on what was being discussed in the threads. So people would, if nobody did any updates for ages and went, here, go done, it would go from 0 to 100%. Whereas if people kept putting them screenshots and things, I'd be like, that's about 20%.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh my god!
And then everyone else, because it was volunteering, it was a case of, I've just got to trust everyone to do it because you're volunteering your time. I'm not going to be draconian and tell you must do these things by these dates and whatnot. It's a simple case of you're volunteering your time. Be free and do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And luckily it worked because everyone was passionate about the project.
Yeah. And actually, when you were talking about how you sort of fell into the lead role, the project manager role, I remember it where Kazahana he just sort of fell silent for a while, and the maps that he was working on just sat there incomplete for a while, to the point where we were kind of getting nervous. And during that vacuum, when he just wasn't there, I just remember you sort of stepping up. I don't remember it ever having like a formal thing where, oh, Gazz is leading it now. But I remember he came back, and he didn't tell us he had been working on E1M7 again. He just came back and said, here, I've been working on E1M7. I think it's done. And I think he may have even said, if there's any other bugs or anything, like, you guys can take care of it.
I don't remember any of that, to be honest. I was probably in the thick of doing E1M8 and 9 at the time. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I think Blaster might have done some touching up on it as well, on E1M7. So I think that probably correlates, because I think he did go in and do some tweaks on it just to tidy it up a bit more before we released it. Yeah, but as I said, all those intricacies, a lot of it is it's a bit lost to me now because it was so long ago. I think it's just the fact we managed to get it done and launched and released, and
it's really sad that I was unable to get a hold of Blaster, because I remember, I mean, just even recently, I swear within 6 months, he and I were messaging on Twitter. But he's just gone now. I cannot find him, and it's really unfortunate because I really wanted to talk with him about E1M6. When he was building that level, there's that section that used to be like in the original, it was like a sewer kind of maze on like the one end, and that was all just to get one of the keys. In his version, he made it like that whole section of the level was like a hellscape with lava and stones that you had to go across.
So cool. I'd forgotten that he did that.
It was so cool. It was so
I was
cool.
just like, oh my god, I forgot about this. This is amazing. Like, so good. Like it looked like it was full on Hell Doom 3 as well.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It was such a good job on that.
I remember talking with him about that when he was making it, and how I had, at some point when he was working on the level, I finished the song for E1M6, and he said he just loaded it up, and while he was working on editing the level, he was playing my song in the background. And there was something about it inspired him to make it as hellish as possible. And he worked for hours on that level and listened to my song the whole time, which is crazy to me because it's like a minute long and it just loops over and over. But man, yeah, it's really sad I wasn't able to find him and talk to him about this stuff.
Yeah, that would be if he does end up watching this interview, then that's an official call out to get his say on how he built that section, because it was really good.
Oh yeah, and if there's any, if he ever watches this, Blaster, Mr. Stephen Brown, if you ever watch this, like we really wanted you to be a part of this, and unfortunately we just weren't able to find you in time. And who knows, maybe by the time I get further into this, he'll come around. But yeah, we loved your work on the mod, and it's really sad that we weren't able to talk with you.
Well, it's the mod stands for itself, and it's still there, Yeah. Being on ModDB, it's listed there for all time now, I think.
Yeah.
It's listed up there as one of their, got Mod of the Month, and it's still got the label on the site and all those little accolades and things.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it's just the whole team, really. I mean, it's good.
How was it? How was it for you when, being part of arguably the most popular or at least the top 3 mod at the time. Like, how was that for you, knowing that when we put the work out there, people were actually going to play it?
Well, like I said originally, I didn't think they would. I thought it was just a backwater mod of people who would just come together to do a few maps, and people would play it, whatever. What will be, will be. And then overnight, obviously, sorry, I remember the number because I was like, we broke 10,000 downloads overnight. Oh my god. So I remember that. And I don't know, I remember it hitting me, but it wasn't, again, because the type of person I am and always have been, what needs to be done gets done. So I don't really think about it too much. It's like, the only other way it's completely unrelated. The only thing I can compare it to is I used to do a job in communications, and any email or message that I'd send out would go out to about 18,000 people. And these are official statements on behalf of who I was working for, right? So for me, if I ever stopped for a moment and thought that the messages I'm putting out is going to go to that volume of people, you could become paralysed by it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a case of, right, I've got to do this is my job, here's the message I've got to do, blah, 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 type it out, blah, blah, send the email, done.
Yeah.
Move on to the next thing and forget about it. But that's always been my mentality with things. I've done this thing, and I'm going to move on and forget about it. I've got to do the next thing now, move on, forget about it, do the next thing. Because I'm always in the moment. So when you talk about so I've always had that mentality. So you go back to the mod, and I just did the task that needed to be done, and just moved on to the next thing. That's why I never really thought about the mod itself. Like you said about what's its legacy, and it's only recently that I've only really given it a second thought, because I did the mod and moved on, and had my career, had a life, and it was something that I did years ago, and it's just in my past. I haven't really reflected on it because I'm not that kind of person. But yeah. So it's an interesting one to think about how did I cope with that? Well, I didn't really think about it. It was just a case of doing what needed to be done and moving on to the next thing. I don't know. That's probably just my mentality about these kind of things. I know it's probably not the norm.
Well, I think most of us probably felt at the very minimum, we all felt a little responsibility to, a community that was really looking forward to the thing being finished. Like, could you imagine if we got to 0.7 or 0.9 and never finished, or never got to 1.0? Like, oh my god!
That would never happen though, because once you start, again, this is my mentality speaking. Once I start working on something like this, I wouldn't finish until I've done it.
I have a feeling, Mr. Gareth Ward, that if even if all the other people in the project dropped off, you would have taken it upon yourself to finish it. You would have thrown the thing on your back and just finished it. Maybe not the music, but levels, everything.
Yeah,
you would have done it.
Yeah, definitely. Once I'm committed to a project, I get it done. That's always been my way, It's just that's just who I am, really.
I probably should get back to work, and if there are things that we didn't touch upon in this that you think of later, just let me know. We can do a couple of these if you need. And once everything is uploaded, I'll do the raw export. I don't know if if you've seen how I'm doing those. So right on the Riverside site, you can do an export where you keep the ratios the same and then put a background on it and just export it unedited. You can watch it. It's kind of long at this point, but you can watch it. And if we've left anything out, just let me know. But next, we'll have to schedule mine. Yeah,
it'd be good. It'd be interesting. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're up to.
So I'm gonna stop the recording in a second. Don't forget to leave the browser open to this website, or else we might lose your side of things, and that would be really bad.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you again, Gazz, for coming on to the Sonic Clang podcast. It's not really a Sonic Clang podcast. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna stop